In this video, we are exploring the reasons why it seems that everyone is still moving to Austin, Texas, in spite of things that we've talked about in the past that work against Austin, Texas, such as its decreasing affordability or its increasing crime, its changing culture, so on and so forth. And hopefully by the end of this video, we'll help you get a better idea and help you arrive at your own conclusion as to whether or not Austin, Texas is right or wrong for you. Stay tuned. Hey again, everybody. This is Frank with the Living in Austin group, now at eXp Realty. Every week we put out new content about living in Austin, Texas, the good and the bad, so consider subscribing if you haven't already, and ring that little bell to get notified whenever we put out a new video. We also love the reach outs we get now all the time from people just like you in need of our help when relocating to the greater Austin area, so keep them coming. Don't hesitate, whether you're 9 days away or 90. Shoot our team a text, send us an email, give us a call any day of the week. Any time of day, we've got your back on moving to Austin, Texas. So yes, in this video, we are exploring why so many people are still flocking to Austin, Texas all the time, keeping it among the top cities in the entire country for relocation, in spite of the aforementioned imperfections that Austin, Texas has, such as its rapid increase in crime, such as its rapid decrease in affordability, the way the culture is changing from past to present. Even heck, in the past 5 years, its culture has really shifted with all the companies coming here. And so there are a lot of reasons that we've talked at length about in the past as to why Austin, Texas might not be the right place for you. Even at risk of discouraging or dissuading you guys on this channel, we absolutely pride ourselves in keeping it blunt and pretty straightforward so that you are as prepared as possible before making such a big decision. So without further ado, and perhaps in defense of Austin, let's get right to it and break down some of the reasons why, in spite of its imperfections, Austin, Texas is still the top choice for many. Starting out, let's get perhaps the most controversial of reasons out of the way first, and that would be the subject of politics. And so rest assured, we are not necessarily going to talk about politics because that's not what this channel is for, nor do I have any interest in talking about that, as I would, I guess, reluctantly identify as a centrist, but in all honesty, I have strong distaste for both sides, so I'm not really the one to talk to anyways. But the fact of the matter is, it is my job to relay what we've heard from clients who have reached out to us and the reasons why people are wanting to come to Texas. And yes, one of the biggest is politically driven. And so truth of the matter is, Texas, for better and worse, is a red state. And so it has its strengths, it has its weaknesses, its pros and its cons. And regarding COVID and the treatment of COVID and things like that, a lot of people have been looking at Texas as a place that perhaps could be perceived as selfish or careless, but for other people, it could be perceived as free, right? So people are reaching out to us saying, you know, they're forcing our kids to wear masks in school, or they're teaching our kids things that we don't want them to teach, or they're making us get vaccinated, or they're making us show proof of vaccination and things like that, riots and protests and just a mess in a lot of these blue states. And it doesn't even mean that the people reaching out to us are conservative or Republicans. They're just looking at the state of where they live, and they're looking at Texas, and it just makes more sense to them. So I think a lot of people are coming to Texas for that reason because, hey, we haven't had to wear a mask here in what feels like ages. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong. That's just the reality that has been here. You could look at it as a negative or a positive, just depending, of course, on who you are. But yes, politics is a big reason, believe it or not. In spite of what has felt like a blue wave in recent years, they're looking at red states as the states to go, especially as certain places like California or New York have been struggling. And so it might be right for you, might be wrong for you, but it's just something to keep in mind if you are on the fence trying to make your decision and see what resonates better with you. Moving right along, we are now going to talk about another reason why so many people are flocking to Austin, Texas, and that would be the economy, the jobs, the opportunity, the booming business. So in case you have been perhaps living under a rock or just tuning out a lot of the headlines in the media, as many people like to do, Austin, Texas is the hub for growth in the country right now. I'm not sure if it's number one or if it's top 5, but you've got Google here, you've got Facebook here, you've got Tesla here, you've got Samsung here, you've got Dell here, IBM, Amazon, Apple. I feel like I might be repeating myself, but moral of the story is all of these big companies, primarily tech companies, are coming to Austin, Texas from the San Francisco Bay Area, creating what is no longer old college town Austin, Texas. This is now becoming dare I say, the San Francisco of the state of Texas. And while that absolutely has its drawbacks, especially for the locals who are quite unhappy with it, it also has a lot of its strengths regarding the economy and jobs and growth, an opportunity for a lot of people who are wanting to either change their career, get a promotion, work from home, relocate, whatever the reason may be. And so, no, I'm not trying to say that Austin, Texas is recession-proof or that the state of Texas is recession-proof, but it is quite a strong place if that is why you are eyeing it in the first place. A place for opportunity and an endless growth with all these factories coming here, $17 billion Samsung plant, the Tesla plant just west of Bastrop, Texas and southeast Austin. And so if the job market or your career is atop your priority list, if that is the driving reason that you are considering Austin, Texas above the schools, above the safety, above the affordability, then Austin, Texas might be the perfect place for you in spite of its imperfections. Up next, let's talk affordability. And this is interesting because ultimately it is relative and it boils down to subjective perspective, right? So, truth be told, Austin, Texas is less affordable than Houston. Austin, Texas is less affordable than Dallas. Austin, Texas is less affordable than San Antonio, than El Paso, than Corpus Christi, so on and so forth. Basically, any city in the state of Texas is going to be cheaper than living in Austin, Texas. So regarding that, in Austin, Texas, a current conversation, if you will, among local Austinites is how the opposite of affordable Austin, Texas has become. It's hard to rent here, much less even buy a house for a lot of people. And so if you ask someone who lives here, they're going to tell you, no, go anywhere but Austin. It is so expensive now, and it's happening at a rapidly alarming pace. So that is one perspective, right? But as I mentioned, it's relative, and here's where it's relative. People who live in California, people who live in Portland, Oregon, people who live in the state of Washington, people who live in New York, Canada, so on and so forth, are also paying a fortune, and most often they are paying even more of a fortune where they live. And so they look at Texas and they look at Austin, and yes, they know that Austin, Texas is by far the most expensive option in Texas, but they look at the no-sin income tax and they look at how, let's say, if I'm paying $750,000 for a house in Portland, Oregon, what will $750,000 buy me in Austin, Texas? And that's the thing. A lot of Austin, Texas is more expensive, and a lot of Texas now has comparable median home prices to a lot of these states, but where the difference is what that money will buy you in the state of Texas versus the respective states near the coasts. That's why a lot of people are coming here. Not because Austin, Texas is dirt cheap, and don't get me wrong, in many parts of the greater Austin area, it is relatively affordable. But even still, relating to where they're coming from and how they're being priced out of their own states, Austin, Texas being a hotspot, if you will, a trendy, progressive, cool place in the state of Texas, which is otherwise very old-fashioned, look at that and it makes perfect sense for them. So again, don't get me wrong, Austin, Texas is absolutely more expensive now than it ever was, and it's going to continue to be that way. However, if you're splitting hairs and you're comparing Austin, Texas with San Francisco or Los Angeles or Portland or Seattle or Manhattan, the choice becomes very clear. And so yes, Austin, Texas, with how it's growing and expanding, is pissing a lot of people off, but it's also making perfect sense for people who feel the need to come here for a more affordable way of life. Moving right along, now we're going to talk about lifestyle. And this is something I find very interesting as well. So let's say you are considering moving to Texas and you have the main cities, right? San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, and Austin on the table, and all of them are more affordable. And let's say, for the sake of this example, your job is not specific to a certain place. You can just pick freely, right? The case of Austin, Texas is very interesting and attractive. And the reason why is because the lifestyle and aesthetic, the vibe of Austin, whatever word you want to use, stands out among the rest, right? Austin, Texas, for better and worse, as mentioned, is becoming less and less and less Texan. It's becoming more and more and more Austin, or as some very angry people might argue, it is becoming more and more and more Californian. And so, for better and worse, you look at Austin, Texas, and it has this hip, artistic, trendy, active lifestyle. You've got the kayaking, you've got the paddleboarding, you've got the music venues, you've got the music festivals, you've got the vegan food options, you've got the yoga, you've got the crystal shops. And I think a lot of people are attracted to Texas and they like to choose Dallas or Houston because these are very Texan cities, right? But let's be honest, a lot of people who want to come to Texas, or have to come to Texas rather, might not be attracted to that. They might not be attracted to the politics. They might not be attracted to the kind of Texan feel or whatever you want to call it. And so, but if they have to come here, they're going to look at the place that is the least Texan, the place that might remind them of where they're coming from, say Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Los Angeles, or San Francisco, California. Relatively, of course, it's not going to be just like that, but they look at Austin as a place that, okay, well, I'm not really a fan of this whole Texan cowboy thing. Why don't we go to the place that is the least Texan cowboy? And that is going to be Austin, Texas. In addition to its scenery, in addition to its perks and its benefits that come along with, of course, the increasing home prices, right? But that is going to be one of the big reasons why Austin, Texas is still such a hotspot. All these tech companies are not going to Dallas or Houston or San Antonio, at least the way they are with Austin, Texas. And the same logic follows with the home buyers such as yourself who are looking at Texas and they might not want to be in a super Texan place. That alone makes Austin, Texas quite attractive. Now, real quickly before moving on, drop a comment down below for us to get involved with. If we've been providing any value for you, consider liking this video as well as it helps our channel grow. Remember to subscribe, and lastly, share this video with anybody you know who's wanting to learn more about living in Austin, Texas. All right, now lastly, another reason why people are still flocking to Austin, Texas, in spite of its many imperfections, is actually going to contrast what I just talked about regarding the lifestyle of Austin, Texas, and how it is unlike the rest of Texas. The flip side to that still attracts many people, is the truth of the matter that a lot of people are attracted to the Texan lifestyle to begin with. They like the very true stereotype and reputation of warm people, and they like wide open spaces, and they like just the Southern culture itself. That attracts them, especially if they're ready for a change. And so truth of the matter is, a majority of the people who relocate to Austin, Texas are not actually relocating to the city of Austin, Texas, or its city limits, Austin proper, so on and so forth. They are actually relocating to the greater Austin area. So that's going to look like Bee Cave, that's going to look like Round Rock, that's going to look like Buda, Kyle, Bastrop, Leander, Liberty Hill, Georgetown, places that surround the city that are going to be at maximum within 30 to 40 minutes of either the city or the North Austin tech hub where a lot of those tech jobs are. And so by living on the outskirts of Austin, all of a sudden, culturally, aesthetically, vibe-wise, it no longer feels so much like Austin. All of a sudden, you're back in Texas. And there's a lot of pros that come with that. And in my personal opinion, my favorite of which is really the size of Texas. And I spent about a little over a year in Pasadena, California, about 20 to 30 minutes east of Los Angeles. And that was plenty for me. And, in terms of how everything there feels crammed and densely populated and everything's small and parking is always an issue. And it just feels like static all the time. Static, stress, anxiety, drugs, everything that city is made of, right? And so you come to Texas, and by default of its size, which if you haven't been here, you're really gonna know what I'm talking about when you get here, everything is larger and spread out. And it might have a high population in Austin, but because of its size, you don't feel that as much. Sure, the traffic is getting worse, especially the closer you are to the city, but on the outskirts, it's wide open roads. It's 85 mile per hour toll roads. It's large, gigantic parking lots. It's a gigantic, oversized, super extra H-E-B or Walmart or Target that in other states would be tiny little corner shops, So the neighborhoods reflect that as well. The backyards reflect that as well. The schools reflect that as well. In addition to the warmth of the people and the laid back feel of the state compared to some crazy busy other places in the country. And so a lot of people, if they're not coming to Austin because it is less Texan than the rest of Texas, they're coming to Austin and the outskirts of Austin because they want to be part of Austin, or at least close enough to dabble in it if they so choose, but to otherwise reside in suburbia that feels more Texan. And so that is going to be a strong reason why people like to come here, at least based off the input and feedback we've heard from the clients who reach out to us. So there you have it. Austin, Texas does have homelessness increasing. Austin, Texas does have tents increasing. Austin, Texas has shootings. Austin, Texas is getting less affordable. Austin, Texas is becoming this tech hub for better and worse. Austin, Texas has a lot of these imperfections that honestly make a lot of sense if it's not right for you. And yet, by the day, more and more people are just coming here all the time in spite of those things. And hopefully in this video, we've done a decent enough job of explaining to you why that is, why the pros might still outweigh the very serious cons. So ultimately, it might not be right for you. But if it is, again, that is what we are here for, helping people relocate to the greater Austin area, making that move as smooth as possible, and finding that perfect place for you. But the only way we can do that is by you reaching out to us. So again, don't hesitate, whether you're 9 days away or 90, reach out to our team, whether you shoot us a text, give us a call, send us an email any day of the week, any time of day. And again, we put out new content every week about living in Austin, Texas, the good and the bad. So remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that little bell to get notified whenever we put out a new video. Comment down below, like this video if we've been providing any value for you, share it with anybody you know, and until the next one, you guys, my name is Frank. This is Living in Austin, Texas, and we will absolutely catch you later.